So what we already did over the last lectures is we created folders and files to add routing to our Vue app through Next's approach here. Now, thus far we always entered a URL manually. Now, time to change this and time to add some links. So let's go to the index.vue file on the pages folder and let's remove all the content in there and let's instead add a link that leads us to the user's page. Now, of course, one thing we can do is we can use a normal anchor tag and navigate to /users here and say users like this. If I do this and this recompiles and I go back to just localhost 3000, then I see /users. If I click this, I'm taken to the user's view. But one important thing happens. If I click this, actually a brand new page will be loaded. So this is now loaded by sending a new request to the server and rendering back a new page. Sometimes you want this, but sometimes you want to stick to this Vue single page application that still runs. Because remember what I said in the first module? Even with Next, where we pre-render pages on the server, once the first page is pre-rendered, we still have a single page application because we want to stay in that world of fast and instant responses. The main difference to a normal Vue single page application simply is that all starting pages for different URLs can be pre-rendered entirely on the server instead of in the client. So right now we're always getting a new page. And let's say we don't want that. We want to stay in that single page application world. In a normal Vue app, we would now use router link. This is a component we can use to create a link that behind the scenes uses the anchor tag, but where the Vue router catches all clicks on the link and prevents the default of sending a request. In Next, the equivalent is Next link, just like that. Next link also creates an anchor tag and catches any clicks to ensure that no request is sent. So here we can now add users, and now to Next link we need to add a property, the to property, and point to /users, for example. Now by doing this, if we save that file and we go back to the localhost 3000 page and reload it once, we still got that link, and by clicking on it we got the same behavior as before, but technically something else is happening, no new request is sent. And you can actually kind of see that if you watch closely at the top of the screen, at your screen maybe, where you see it a bit better. You get the tiny loading indicator there, that green flash. This is coming from Next, and I will show you how to modify it later in the course when we dive into the Next configuration. But it proves that actually the transition here is all happening in the browser without a request being sent. And this is how we can navigate around by clicking links. Sometimes you also want to navigate around programmatically. Like let's say here in the user's page, we want to go to a user's page here. Now let's say to get there, we'll add a div, and there first of all we add an input. In that input here, I want to be able to enter a user ID, and then I want to add a button that takes me to that user ID. So I say load user here. Now since we're in a normal Vue component, we can use normal Vue component features. We add a script section where we export a default object. And in here, let's first of all add a data property, which in components should be a function where you return an object. And this is all normal Vue code, not related to Next. And in here, let's add a variable or a property where we can store the user input, maybe named user ID, and it's an empty string initially. And then we can bind that input here with vModel. Again, just like in a normal Vue app. And we bind it to user ID to store whatever the user enters here in this user ID property. And then I'll add a method which I want to trigger when we click this button. I'll name that onloadUser. And in here, I now want to go to that user page for the ID the user entered here in that input. So there, to the button, I'll add a click listener with @click. And then I want to execute onloadUser here. Without parentheses, I'll just pass a pointer to that method down there. And in that method, I now want to navigate programmatically. This can be done by accessing this router push. Now again, we're using the default Vue router here, which simply is injected into all our Vue components. So this is normal Vue code, not coming from Nuxt. The only thing coming from Nuxt here is that the router exists, because Nuxt spins it up behind the scenes and passes our page-driven translated configuration to it. So in push, we can now again simply pass a string to go to /users/ and then the ID, so this user ID. And this should now load this route here for the UID we entered. Let's see this in action by saving this and going back. Here's the input field and the button. Now let's enter 1 here and click that button, and we see ID 1. If I go back and I enter something here and click that button, we see with ID something, and the URL of course reflects this. So this is now how you can navigate both in code with a link or programmatically, and how you interact with all these default Vue features and the route config given to you by Nuxt.js.